Here we are, guys, starting to put these carbs back together. I already got this guy back on, and one of these screws was different. This is the stuff that I took off. Well, because this carb was in pieces, these are the original screws that came with the bike. But I figured, get that one on. You can see how that is set up on there. 2 more screws will go in there. They're right here, and as you can see, I have one that's different. But let's visit the Carb rebuild set. Carb rebuild kit from I'll put on the screen. I got off eBay, and came with needles. They're slightly different than the originals. Let's see. Hopefully, I don't get this stuff mixed up. I really only wanted the set for the needle because the one needle was bent. You see that? That's slightly different. So, since I have different needles, I figured I better use the parts that came with the set. And hopefully, they all work together as they should. So the kit came with new bolts because they probably assume that you're going to strip these bolts out, take them apart. Came with a new main jet, new idle jet. So there's your primary jet or main jet, and then your initial jet. Sorry. But anyway, and then it always comes with a new adjustment idle. That's what it is. Idle jet, and a new idle adjustment screw. Why? I don't know. Apparently the little tips on there get boogered up. I don't know that I'm going to use the new one. I guess I should, just to get all this stuff used up. But I think the spring should go on there, and one of these washers should go on there. But the kit came with an extra unlabeled main jet. I don't know how that got in there or why there's only one, but it did. And then there's this extra little rubber washer or seal. So anyway, let's see. So all we really need to do, I'm going to show you how to put the top end together, since I already did the other one. I'm using the screws that came with it because they're fine, and I don't see why I would need to use the new ones. But this has all been cleaned out. As I said before, these carbs are very clean, and I think the only reason this wasn't running correctly is probably because of this bent needle that was either getting jammed up down in there, or I guess if it was going up and down, I mean, it really wouldn't work too well. It was probably still letting fuel through. So anyway, this is probably our problem. So anyway, the way to do this is simply, this only goes in one way. This is specific to the EX500 Ninja. Carb is also used on the 250, used on some other ones, but you can see here, this is the way it's sliding in. If you spin it around, it doesn't fit. You can't put this in incorrectly. So there you go. So don't worry, as long as your diaphragm is in good shape, you can slide this right down in there, and I'll show you. Whoop. Okay, there's the throttle plate. But that's how it sits in there. And this diaphragm needs to be in good shape, no rips or tears. It has to be seated correctly in this groove. So when you're putting the cap on, make sure this is seated correctly and you're not getting anything pinched. This has to be sat in there. so that that's catching the air, because when you use your throttle, the change in pressure is going to push up on this, and that's also what lifts this needle, because this is going to be sitting directly down in this hole. There you go. So that drops straight down in there, and that lifts your needle. And if you would ever find that you need more fuel, say it's bogging down or something when you give it throttle, you can put a shim in there underneath that needle, and then that will lift the needle up ever so slightly more than where it's set factory, and then that is how you would get more fuel through there. For like, what is it, 20% to 80% throttle? Anyway, don't take my word for it, talk to professionals. So okay, you got your needle in there, you got your slide, and here gonna have to make sure this is set correctly. Spin this around, make sure that looks a little boogered up right there, but I think it's fine. Somebody may have not been very careful when they tightened this down at one point, but as long as that seals up correctly, we'll be good to go. I'm hoping that that's not a problem, because yes, that would be an issue if that's not sealing correctly. So beyond that, you have your needle holder. That cap goes in there. That fits right down over that to make sure that that needle is held in there when your slide goes up, and then your spring goes down on top of that to hold the holder in there. And then your cap, dump out the screws. I already did wipe these out. Your cap fits over the needle right there. There's some dirt in there I'll have to get cleaned. Oh, I got rid of it. No, it's still there a little bit. But that sets down on your spring, and then all that goes straight down. Make sure this is all in the groove and set correctly. And then that drops right down on. Hold it on there. Start 2 of the screws diagonally. And then once that's set on there, you can put the other 2 on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's how you put the top together. Alright, got this bowl put all back together. And this one is all tightened up, ready to go back on. I didn't use any torque specs for this. I just tightened them so that they were tight. And don't over tighten them, because you could make problems. But this guy's cleaned up. Also have the drain plug reinstalled, and she's ready to go on. So we'll line this up correctly. Drop this straight down. Not too worried about this going on wrong, because there's little indents here. Oh, dropped right on there. As long as your gasket doesn't fall out. Let's check it just to be safe. Yep, she's seated in there pretty good. Just make sure that, I mean, you could do it, you don't have to do this upside down. I'm just doing it to show you. You could do it the other way so that your gasket's sitting where it's supposed to be. Then we're going to drop the original bolts down in there. And that will be good and clean and ready to go. Now, you're probably wondering why I didn't use all the new parts that came with the kit. And on this specific situation, I got this bike non-running with all these parts torn apart. And I have no idea if the bike even runs. But I'd like to put all the OEM parts in as I can. The only reason I got the kit to rebuild it was because of this needle. And the only reason I used new needles and the new jets is because the needle was different. If this needle was the same as the one that came in the kit, I would have just changed out the needles. I would have used both new ones, just because these could be worn a little bit and you want both carburetors acting or operating at the same specs. But that's the only reason I use the new jets. Here is the idle adjustment screw, and you can see even those are different. I mean, they're similar. It's just basically the adjustment or the tightening needle is extended here. But I'm going to use the OEM ones because I want to know what was wrong with this bike. And I want to put everything back in the way it should be. It could have been as simple as this not being adjusted correctly. When I pulled them out, they were only in one turn. So they should be about 2.5. I'm going to look at the specs on that, but I believe typically they're about 2.5. So probably about 2.5 turns is where that's going to be set when I put it all back together. Also, here's the new springs that go on the end of that. The old ones are a little bit longer, which really doesn't make a difference. But I'm going to use the original setup. Specifically because I did not take out the O-ring and the washer that are in there. That could be a little different. And if I'm not using these, which I believe are the ones that would go with the new one, I just want everything to be as OEM as possible. So there's the OEM needle. Doesn't look damaged to me. Obviously these little tiny points can be messed up, but it looks okay. I cleaned it up, cleaned up nice. So I'm going to drop that in there. Remember, if you change out the OEM or the needle and the washer and the O-ring, make sure everything goes in there straight. I don't even know how to replace that. I guess you put it on the end of the needle. Don't have it upside down, obviously, because it'll fall in and it may not be straight. So make sure you have the carburetor upright. Well, now I pulled that off. Make sure you have the carburetor upright and you carefully insert it from below. Then you can probably get it in straight. Or drop the O-ring in. Make sure it's in there seated correctly. Drop the washer in. Make sure it's in there correctly. And then drop this down. Make sure it's in there correctly. And then you can tighten it down. Tighten it the whole way in. And then turn it out as far as you want it to be. Like I said, probably going to be 2.5 would be about where we want to be. So all of this stuff right here is new. It came with the kit. And I'm not going to use it at this point. If I need it, it's here. I can tear them down and do it again.